The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
'Tis the season. October. I know it's October 2nd. I'm aware of that. But this is a fine time of year. I love it. The lead up to the NBA season, the baseball playoffs. Those are my two sports, guys. You probably know that about me. I love baseball. I love basketball. I'm an unabashed Dodgers fan. And luckily, I don't do a baseball podcast because you guys would have to hear about that all the time. As it stands, you only have to hear me talk about basketball, and I'm very pragmatic because when I have money on the line, which I do in these fantasy basketball leagues, I have a way of burying my Lakers homerdom in favor of victory. It's why I very rarely have Lakers on my fantasy team. Last few years, they've been a pretty awful fantasy club. You know, I'm not going to lead you astray. Now, if it was baseball, I'd probably end up taking Dodgers because I'm troubled like that. So the baseball playoffs are beginning tonight. Wild card games. Basketball is exactly 2 weeks away. Real games today, folks. Real games. Not preseason. I know there's some stuff we can take away from the preseason, but let's be honest. A lot of this is wildly overinflated. Really short bursts of minutes. Guys just picking on each other. High-scoring games. Blah, blah, blah. Some guys sitting out. The minutes are not accurate. Maybe some of the lineups are. You can peel a little bit of that from the preseason, but overall, this is not that much, not that dissimilar from Summer League, where you can take a little bit of information, but more often than not, the best thing you can take away from preseason NBA is what not to do. Maybe that's a more accurate way to put it. The preseason can teach us what not to buy into, but it really can't teach us what to buy, right? So it's going to steer us away from mistakes, but it's not really going to steer us toward any sweet victory. So, Lauri Markkanen got himself hurt. We can steer away from that. Markelle Fultz in the starting lineup. I don't know that necessarily means he's going to be a superstar immediately, but it could probably steer us away. Not that we were really looking hard at TJ McConnell to begin with, but it would certainly steer us away from that. Does it steer us away from JJ Redick? Not really. I think he's about same what he was before. His role is fairly well set in stone, and no Marco Bellinelli, so they have really but one monster of an outside shooter now. A lot of guys can space the floor on that team, but not many of them can do it quite like JJ can. So anyway, it's just an example, not really the point of all of this. The point of all of this is we're 2.5 minutes into a podcast, and I haven't said hello to you yet. Hello, everybody. I am Dan Besbris. This is Fantasy NBA Today. The era of the guest continuing momentarily. We'll be talking to Alex Rikleen on today's show, breaking down his team from our 9-category industry mock draft. We're going through them one by one right now, folks. We started last week on Thursday. We broke down Team Seth Klein. We talked to Josh Lloyd on Friday. We talked to Matt Smith on yesterday's podcast. We also spoke to Lucas Johnson of the Sixers Sense yesterday to get a better idea, actually to get a better sense of what the Markelle Fultz starting lineup thing actually means, if anything. That was fun. Another big thank you to Lucas for coming on the pod for the first time. Very gracious fellow, very friendly. Had a really nice chat with him off the air. You always know, you can always pick out your favorites because those are the guys that just want to hang out after the pod, and that was awesome. So you'll be hearing more from Lucas throughout the season. He is up in the hills of Virginia, but he's talking to us about the 76ers this year. That's a really nice new connection we got here on the podcast. What's coming up over the course of this week? Well, we have a number of these pros, actually, to talk to. So, I guess we might as well just launch into the first one here, but just wanted to remind everybody, we got Ethan Noroff coming up, we got Kyle McCune still on deck, we got Mark Roberts, we got the ITL guys. I haven't fully decided yet what order all of this is going to be presented to you, but it's all in the bucket. All of these conversations have either happened or will happen in the next 24 hours, Jonas Nader, we'll talk to Jonas later on this week. Hopefully talk to Russ Peddle next week. He wasn't in the mock draft, but we got nothing but love for the Rusty Pedal bike, man. This is a great time. That's the point of it all. So let's hop right into it. We'll talk about some of the other stuff later on in the podcast. No sense delaying the fun goodies, the things you've come for. So we'll get right into that now. This is the fun stuff, isn't it, guys? This is the fun stuff. This is where we're talking about mock drafts every day, the run-up to the season. We've got so many pieces of information. We have so much data at our fingertips right now, this time of year, where it's all we can do to just try to keep podcasts to... God, I think didn't I do one show last week that was like 75 minutes long? That was foolish. It was not my intent, but it's how it ended up. That might continue to happen. This is a warning going forward because we're breaking down an Industry 9-cat roto style. Should make sure to throw that in there. Mock draft that this first time, by the way, that I've ever actually set up one of these industry mocks. And I'll admit it was a little bumpy at first. I had a number of roster spots that were all goofball, but everybody was nice enough to bear with me. And now they're also nice enough to come on the podcast and talk about their teams and talk about what everybody else did that was either really smart or really dumb. And the first person to throw everyone else under the bus is Alex Rikleen. So that's a good intro, right? Alex, of course, fantasy sports writer at RotoWire and DraftKings. He also just relaunched I believe you called it a shorter fantasy podcast. Fast Breaks Fantasy is the name of the show. At Fast Breaks Fan on Twitter. At Rikleen, Rikleen. Alex, your debut. You're hopping on Fantasy NBA today. Thank you so much for slumming it with us here.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
So Alex was in the industry mock draft. He had second pick overall. And what I'd like to do here with basically anybody that's willing to do it is just kind of go over your team, what you ended up with, whether there were guys nearby that maybe you were targeting that came off the board, and just kind of how you feel about how the mock went overall. And then we'll segue into maybe some goodies on the rest of the mock. Because for me, it was a lot of fun. We went, I think, probably one round deeper than I had originally intended. We did 14 rounds on this thing, and everybody was pretty good about it. Slow mock, bounced around a little bit. You had the second pick overall, so generally yours were a little closer together. And we can just dive right in, I guess. You had James Harden second. That seems like a pretty reasonable way to start, right?
Yeah, it was actually a little weird for me. By random chance, I never end up drafting early. I'll find that I always end up drafting late in the round, and so I'm just so used to that. So it was almost bizarre to have such a easy and clear decision up at the top. To me, there is a clear top six this year, and within the top six, Davis and Harden do stand out a little bit of an edge above the other four. So for me, once I saw that I was the second pick, I was easy. I was just going with whichever of Harden or Davis was left. I figured that Jonas would take the one of the two, and that ended up being right. Davis went first, so I took Harden, and I was happy about that. I felt like good, safe, confident way to start off, and then I could sort of let 20 picks pass and see what people were doing and try to get a sense of how the room was going to go.
Yeah, it's hard. I've always thought it's kind of hard when you have picks that far apart. Certainly not for the first round. It's nice to be right up at the front end like that, but as the draft goes along, you end up having to make these really tough decisions, just knowing that basically anybody that you're targeting in that next 20 is just not getting back to you. But I guess we can talk about that as your team build takes place here. Quick question here at the top of the draft for you. Karl-Anthony Towns went third, and we'll talk to Mark Roberts a little bit later on, either this week or early next, on his team. But with the Jimmy Butler news, does that give him any kind of a kick in the pants? Could he potentially move into that top tier?
No, he has no chance of reaching the top two for me, but he is one of those guys who I would consider. I would consider him anywhere. I actually consider Towns as an interesting case where I'm okay with taking him second. I'm just not okay with taking him ahead of Anthony Davis. If you decide you want to start with a big man, I'm okay with you taking Towns over Harden.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've tried over and over to make an argument for Towns over Davis, and even with a pending Butler trade, I just can't do it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that. Second round pick, you had pick number 23 coming back and ended up with Kevin Love. Interesting. Okay, so it looks like, at least, seeing that you grabbed him here at 23, you and I are floating on a raft together with this one where we really like Kevin Love while everybody else is telling us that he's going to play 55 games. Feel free to tell me why you and I are smart and everybody else is foolish on this one. Or maybe you're going to tell me, no, you're abandoning ship and I'm back on my own.
Well, I mean, I have long been on the Kevin Love is more of an injury risk beat than I think he gets credit for. I think he actually gets away with, well, I don't know if gets away is the right word, but I think he is absolutely an injury risk. But, I mean, you look through this second round, and everyone in this second round is an injury risk, including the people right at the top of the round. Russell Westbrook just had a third surgery in his knee. Joel Embiid, we don't need to say anything about that. Jimmy Butler, at the time that he was drafted, he was still suffering under the wrath of Thibodeau's rotation. John Wall recovering from injury, Kyrie Irving recovering from injury, Chris Paul soon to be recovering from an injury that hasn't happened yet. I mean, this whole round is injury focused, and I think Kevin Love is probably going to put up better stats than at least half of them. He's, I think, 30 now, so he basically spent his prime in Cleveland, and he had his build up to his prime in Minnesota as the only option with terrible supporting cast. And now his immediate post-prime is the only option with a terrible surrounding cast. And obviously his game isn't going to be identical. When you're 30, you don't have the same sort of athleticism that you have when you're 24, 25, 26. But I think that the numbers are going to be very comparable, and that physically your overall skill set is going to be pretty similar. I have him closer to 17 or 18 in my individual ranks. I have him above of a bunch of the people who are taken here. I didn't even think twice. I was shocked he made it to me.
Yeah, and I'm actually seeing him go farther than this in drafts that are not with a host of industry pros. I've seen him fall as far as the early 30s, and to me, that's a spot where you absolutely have to take a risk. And it is a risk. I think it's tough to say he's not an injury risk, because he is. But at that point, you're looking at a guy that has the potential to go at as high as like top 10, 12 on a per game basis. And you kind of have to. You have a little
I'm
bit
more interested in per game basis than I am in total games. I'd rather someone play a great 60 games for me than a slightly less good 70 games for me. Because I'm going to fill in that roster spot. If you're out, I know you're out, and I can replace you in my lineup. I can still do better than replacement value for those 20 games. So, obviously you'd rather your team not get hurt, but I would take 50 great games over 70 good games. And that's a sort of baseline drafting philosophy that I have.
Yeah, you and I should probably never be in the same league, because I think we have the exact same roster build, which is I'm very confident that I can find somebody to fill in an open spot, and it sounds like you are as well. So you're hunting somebody who's going to just dominate for as long as they're on the floor, and that actually explains to some degree your next couple of picks as well. Gary Harris early in round 3, just coming off a fantastic year, but he's another guy that gets dinged up from time to time. I take it you're looking kind of for the same. I mean, it's not going to be Kevin Love level where the upside of, late first round type per game stuff, but it seems to me you're looking at a guy who has a really nice fantasy stat set and gets dinged up from time to time, and you just sort of shoot for 65 to 73 games or something like that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really liked about getting Gary Harris here was having started with Harden and then Kevin Love. I started with a pseudo point guard and a big man, and I think that there are a couple of really good wing values in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. I think that Harris is almost criminally undervalued right now, and so I was really glad that I was able to, whereas usually I end up with Gary Harris in most of the leagues I play in, but whereas most of the time I'm saying, do I really need another wing on top of, Kawhi Leonard or Oladipo or Paul George, from drafting late in the 1st round. This time it was super easy because I didn't have wings yet. I didn't have that sort of stat profile.
Interesting. Okay, so we can jump ahead to round 4. You had a pick late in that one, pick 47. Gordon Hayward. This is another kind of upside play where if he comes back healthy, he can exceed that level, but there is a little bit of risk involved. So tell me how you landed on Gordon here.
Well, this one is actually a sad case because I wanted Gordon and Josh Richardson, and I believe this is the league where I asked the guy I picked Gordon because I figured that Richardson was more likely to come back to me. And then after Richardson got picked in the middle, I said, would you have taken Gordon? And they said, no, I would have let Gordon go. So I had 2 guys that I wanted, and I picked which one to take first strategically incorrectly.
Yeah, that was Jonas Nader, by the way, who had the pair of picks between you coming back to you, Tobias Harris and Josh Richardson. You ended up, by the way, in round 4 and 5 here making kind of a Wheel of Fortune clue kind of team, Aaron, Gordon, and Hayward. But we'll talk about Aaron Gordon in a second. So Gordon Hayward, you picked the wrong one of the 2. You wanted Josh Richardson, but if Gordon Hayward pans out, this could end up being a really nice pick.
Yeah, and I wanted Gordon Hayward on my team. I just wanted both of them on my team. So with Gordon Hayward, when his last full season, he was, I think, according to Basketball Monster, I think he was 32nd overall. Mm-hmm. So we really think that he is going to drop 15 spots in the overall ranking just because he has more talent around him? The best players rise to the top. I get that argument when you're talking about someone who's not a borderline all-star, but we're talking about really the headliner or the second headliner on this Celtics squad, someone who has a pre-existing relationship with the coach, the first, big free agency signing they've made in forever. This is a huge deal. There's no way that he's going to, be playing 28 minutes per game. So what are we worried about? Why are we dropping him so far? And it seems like, as far as I can tell, the kind of random freak injury where it takes a long time to recover, but once you've recovered. This doesn't strike me as one of those sort of, plantar fasciitis things where you're never healed from that for the rest of your life. You're going to be a 70-year-old man, and you're going to still be fighting plantar fasciitis and, walking with inserts in your shoes.
And what if you're like 35 and walking with inserts in your shoes? What kind of an old man does that make you? We're talking Alex Rikleen.
I'm 31 and I'm walking with them, so I know the pain.
Well, you and I come from a similar genetic background where I think we're sort of predisposed to ailments. Alex Rikleen here, we're talking to him about the 9-cat roto mock draft that we ran last week. A lot of really cool people in that mock, by the way. Really excited to get everybody on and have everyone's thoughts going here back to back, et cetera, et cetera. Alex, of course, you can follow on Twitter at Rikleen, Rikleen. We're rumbling along here. We got the first 4 rounds in the book. You've got an interesting kind of roster selection. You had your shooting guard out of the chute. You got one center in there. Gary Harris, kind of another wing, small forward, shooting guard, small forward type like Harden. Gordon Hayward, also kind of similar. You ended up with a power forward in round 5. I was making a Wheel of Fortune joke, which I think tells everybody really how old I am, that and I watch like late afternoon television. Aaron Gordon at 50. I'll tell you right now, I was kind of hoping that, maybe not necessarily for this draft because I was playing it pretty safe overall with my team here, but just in general, he's going a tiny bit earlier than I expected off of that sort of slump of a season last year where he kind of didn't live up to all the hype that he had coming into the year. But he's a guy, and we talked about it with Philip Rossman-Reich, who is kind of prime for a leap forward. I love Aaron Gordon this year. I love guys coming off of a disappointing season where you can still kind of draw a very simple line from them to better fantasy value. So I like your pick here, and I don't think he was going to get back to you at 71. So
certainly not.
Yeah.
I want to push back a little bit, though. It wasn't the whole season that was disappointing.
That's true. He was very good for a month and a half.
He came out of the gate every bit the breakout that we hoped he'd be. But then, he had a couple injuries over the course of the season. But once that first injury hit and he missed some time, he sort of lost a lot of that momentum. And he never fully got it back. But, I mean, he was still a top 60 player, which is better than he'd ever been in his career. And he did show us, like you said, a month and a half where I think he was top 30. So, I think that with the summer to reset and with a Magic team that is somehow getting worse, and you'd think after some number of years they might start getting better. But yeah, I thought that this was it was a good upside play. I wanted Richardson. Richardson was gone. With Richardson off the board, I liked his potential upside. I think that Covington, who you ended up taking that round,
I did,
was just an unbelievable value at that spot. And I really struggled with not taking Covington, but I just felt like I was getting a little too redundant in my roster with Gary Harris and Gordon Hayward, and then adding Robert Covington to that.
Oh, my roster build is an absolute dumpster fire in this league. So I don't even want anybody to talk about that. I think I took my second center in like the 9th or 10th round. It was really, but I had to get, like you said, Rocco made it to me at that point. He's just this unbelievably safe asset. And I love guys where you can just be like, all right, well, I can pencil this dude in for this exact line this year. There's nobody coming for his minutes. They're just not coming for him. He's too good defensively. So, but that's my team. I don't want to talk about that right now. Yeah, I mean, you're right. And that's the thing. And maybe it's, I over the years, I've sort of learned what an incredibly short-term memory people tend to have. And so for Gordon, the fact that you and Philip, by the way, and I'm betting most other folks that I talk to about this draft are going to say the same thing. Like, yeah, he looked really good coming out of the gate. I have this weird feeling like a lot of people forgot about that because he really was kind of epically bad down the stretch. He shot like a high volume 38% or something that just destroyed fantasy teams. But I really like your pick of him here. And I don't think you should feel too bad about Josh Richardson because, there's a chance Dion Waiters plays like 65 games this year and no one else on the Heat will get to take a shot during those games. So it could end up working out okay for you. Your round 6 pick is the first one where I need more explanation on it. Julius Randle. I am getting some serious Draymond Green 2014-2015 vibes from Julius Randle. Interesting. Okay, go on.
This is so with what happened with Draymond Green. Draymond Green in that season is honestly probably my greatest single prediction in 5-ish years working in this industry. He was the person I was going out and telling everyone to draft, and I mean even I didn't expect it to be that good. I thought I had something, but I didn't expect a top 25 player with a 100th pick. But anyway, what I loved about Draymond in that season, going into that season, was he had a month where his per 36 production was off the charts, where he really seemed to grow and seemed to like he was getting in stride and figuring out how to play successfully and really be a factor in this league. And he seemed like he was really sort of starting to stretch his wings, and he didn't quite have enough minutes to make a huge impact on the fantasy scene. But you could see all the pieces coming together. And then the last month of the season, the rest of that squad got healthy. And so he kind of lost some of his playing time, and everyone kind of forgot.
What do you think about the defensive side of the ball for Julius? Is there a world where he can improve on those steals and blocks?
I mean, sure, there's a world where it happens. I'm not really necessarily expecting it. I think, I mean, the 0.5 that he averaged in both categories last season, it is a little disappointing. He did average more steals than that in the 2 previous seasons. So there's definitely potential for him to get at least up to a more manageable, 0.8 or something. But no, I mean, he's not going to be helpful in that category. But I think that he's got a really realistic shot. I mean, this Pelicans roster, I don't really know. Are they going to have an agreement? Are they going to have the parents of the players make an agreement with the opposing team before the game that they're not going to play a full 48 minutes because they don't have enough players there? I don't. What do you do when you don't have a full NBA team show up? They just don't. They don't have 7 NBA players.
No. Well, they're lucky that Anthony Davis can guard 4 people by himself. So that probably helps the cause.
That is really helpful. But so I think he's going to get tons of minutes. His field goal percentage is great. His rebounds are great. I really like a big man who can get 3 assists per game, and I think we're going to be looking at that. I think he could get up to 18. I don't think he'll quite hit 20 points per game, but I think he could get kind of close. I think that we're gonna be looking through the year-end ranks at the end of the season. We're gonna see him deep inside the top 50, and we're gonna be trying to figure out what we missed and how he got there.
Round 7, Lonzo Ball, a man close to my heart here, is an Angelino. We talked to Mike Trudell on this podcast last week, and he mentioned he thought Lonzo was going to get off to a slow start and then ramp up pretty hard. Is that kind of what you're looking for here at 74?
No, I didn't like any of the other point guards on the board.
Well, that was a simple explanation. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing to be able to get a guy in Lonzo that, as a point guard can actually get you blocks. That's a rare treat, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, you're not. I mean, there weren't a ton of options left. I ended up with Darren Collison in this round, kind of that same thing. Like I said, my team is. I have the Centrum Silver squad in almost every draft that I go through. I got all these old guys that it's like, all right, well, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm going to expect out of this dude.
Collison was on my radar. I mean, I at this point, we're entering round 7, and I still don't have any point guards. And Collison was on my radar, but as like a round 8, round 9, second point guard option, I was not. I did not view him as good enough for that spot. I was kind of actually hoping for DeJounte Murray. I never say his first name right. I was kind of hoping for him, but once again, Jonas. I didn't pick great, and Jonas took one of the guys I wanted in between my two. And I mean, Lonzo Ball, his shooting percentage last year was so much worse than it was in college. And if he improves that, he's gonna, again, another one who could be deep inside the top 50 if his shooting percentage improves. I am worried about the impact of LeBron and of Rondo and what that's going to do to their rotations. I think his minutes are safe, but I don't know what kind of funky role they're going to have him playing. So I just needed someone who could get assists and didn't like the other options.
That's fair. And, we got a guy in Lonzo Ball who, like you said, if he fixes the percentages even a little bit, that's enough to make a very large jump in his ranking, because it was very clearly 2 things that were holding him back. Your round 8 pick, by the way, at pick number 95, is one of my favorite picks on the board so far. Evan Fournier, who's just like quietly, I mean, it's the same thing with me. Guys that have been doing the same exact thing for 3 years where for some reason people forget about them.
Oh, you mean my round 9 pick?
Well, okay. So I was saving all my gushing for round 9 for its own special world, but we can put these two together. You got Thad in round 9. Everybody knows how much I love Thad. Last year, I mean, you could get Thad at like 120, 125, which I just thought was the craziest damn thing on earth. He's going closer to 100 this year, and it's still late. Like, this is a guy that just sat in the top 60 all season long, and still nobody believes that he can do it.
I just got to jump in and correct you. All 7 seasons. All of the last 7 seasons.
Thank you. I will take whatever Thad love I can get on this podcast. But I love these two picks. I'll put them together for you. Evan Fournier, Thad Young, where you're just like, oh, okay, well, I know exactly what I'm going to get out of these two guys. I can build a roster around them. They're just going to be quietly there. And provided Fournier can stay on the floor for an entire year, I thought you got two really nice, quiet, good values right around pick 100.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty. You pretty much nailed my thinking. Fournier was also heavily influenced by the scoring. After taking Lonzo Ball, I wanted to really sort of get back up my points total. I felt like early in the draft, I was setting up a team that was really going to be dominant in points, and I didn't want to be sacrificing that much. And Fournier looked like one of the best shooters left on the board. But otherwise, you pretty much nailed my thinking. These are just players who have no chance of ending the season below their ADP in terms of their overall ranking.
Yep. And to me, these are also the kinds of guys, and I said this on a podcast recently as well, where if you're an extremely active trader in your league, you can often kind of package dudes like this, where Fournier gets off to a really hot start, or if Thad does, or whatever, you've got like a month of top 40, top 50 kind of numbers. You can pair a couple guys like that are going to settle back quietly into that top 75 range, and maybe turn two hot top 75ers into like one more permanent top 45er kind of guy, and that's the nice way to upgrade some roster slots while keeping your eye on the waiver wires. I love these picks. I think these are very much Besbris-y kind of picks. And
with Thad plus Gary Harris, I've got some insulation for some of those defensive stats that Julius Randle is lacking.
Well said. Yeah, you're going to have deflections coming out of your ears out of those two spots. Willie Cauley-Stein at round 10. Everybody that hears me knows I have no feel for the Sacramento Kings whatsoever.
None.
So none. I have none. So tell me why, because I legitimately have no idea what's going on out there.
The same day that I made that pick, I had an article go up on RotoWire talking about teams to target, and in my article on teams to target, I sort of diverted the attention to focus on how you should avoid drafting players on the Kings. The Kings are an absolute dumpster fire. I want no part in them. But I really like Willie Cauley-Stein's talent. I didn't have a lot of big men, and I think that Willie Cauley-Stein has a little bit less, threatening behind him in that depth chart than some of the other positions. I am not going to accuse the Kings of making rational, meritorious rotation decisions, but if such a thing does happen, I think he would benefit. Late in drafts, I really try to live by the motto of 70% of the time, 80% of the time, these guys are going to end up on waivers anyways. So it's not a big deal, and go for something that if it hits, you're happy about it. And the guy who went directly after me, again, Jonas sort of sniping me, Patrick Beverley, I sort of thought about him, but I thought I need more big help. And so I went with Willie Cauley-Stein.
Yeah, I'm with you on the screw it mentality at this point in a draft. I had Gallo in that round. That's the ultimate screw it. Bam Adebayo.
Huge upside if it works.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I mean, you're chasing upside at this point. Bam Adebayo, round 11. That's a nice upside chasing spot. If anything happens to Hassan Whiteside, pretty good path.
Exactly. If Whiteside gets traded, if Whiteside, decides that he doesn't like the Miami, I don't know what happened with Whiteside last year. It was weird. But if Whiteside does whatever that was in the spring of 2018 again, then, Bam should be getting good minutes and he'd be doing great. And if not, all right, I'll drop him for someone who is doing well.
I'm going to roll your last three together because now we're really getting into the later parts of the draft. Etuan Moore, Nerlens Noel, and George Hill. Give me the quick hitter version on the thought behind those three guys.
As much as the Pelicans don't have NBA roster players, they really don't have NBA wing players. So if they I don't know who they're going to sub Moore out for. I don't know how he doesn't play 48 minutes. Nerlens Noel, if you filter by per 36 minutes and you eliminate the guys who only played 1 minute or only played 7 minutes per game. Nerlens Noel was a top 20 player last year. He only needs 20 minutes per game to crack the top 100. I don't know if he gets to 20 minutes per game, but that is a low enough target that I am willing to spend a late round pick on that possibility. I do expect him to be the backup behind Adams. There's 15 minutes there. I don't know where the other 5 minutes comes from, but if he can find them, he's a top 100 player. And George Hill, again, I'm not thrilled with my point guard depth. And if he ends up being Cleveland's point guard, he'll probably put up some pretty good numbers.
Yeah, I feel like Cleveland's in this weird spot. I know I'm focusing on your last round pick here, which is probably not the best way to spend a podcast. But Cleveland is in such a weird state of limbo because they just gave Kevin Love a ton of money. They clearly don't want to go into full rebuild mode, but they just got a young point guard who, if they're going to figure out the rebuild stuff, and he went, I think, about 9 picks before you here. Bogman took him at 158. Then they're going to have to get him on the floor. But George Hill has the length to potentially play some time at the 2. And if they're really trying to win games early in the season, then it seems like they'd probably want to play the veteran a little bit. So I don't know. Yeah. I feel like that's not a bad spot to be able to get a veteran point guard that's probably starting in the late 160s of a draft like that. That to me feels like a pretty kind of safe play. And then, as you said earlier, Alex, even if he gives you like 3 weeks of really good production before he falls off a cliff, then you just go replace him down the line, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. We're talking to Alex Rikleen here. Again, we'll give you the details before we break down a couple of the notes on this mock draft. At Rikleen, if you want to follow him on Twitter, Rikleen. He's got a brand new podcast. He's back. The tweet is pinned, so if you follow him on Twitter, you can go check out the latest episode of Fast Breaks Fantasy. That's the name of the show. At Fast Breaks Fan is the Twitter account for Alex's new show. Make sure to go check that out as well. Just general thoughts at this point now. We've broken down your team. Kind of overall, how did you feel like your team ended up getting built? What problems did you run into at the 2 slot that maybe you didn't if you're drafting later in the first round? And what advantages did you end up with in the 2 slot that you wouldn't have if you were drafting maybe middle to late in the overall scheme of things?
So an advantage to the 2 spot versus the 11 spot is I get one of the safest players on the board with James Harden. I think that that's just so valuable to get that locked in as just every night I've got one of the best players on the floor. That's a really confident way to build your team, to start building your team. I actually kind of like drafting around the turn. I find it's kind of helpful to be able to say, all right, these are the 2 or 3 players who I'm interested in. And it doesn't matter which one I think is better overall. I need to look at, Jonas's roster and see, what does Jonas need? What is Jonas thinking? What is Jonas looking for? And order my 2 picks to try to make sure that I get both of the guys that I want. And I kind of enjoy that game. This is supposed to be a game after all. But also I think it's a sort of helpful way to roster build, to be able to have that sort of that I think it makes it easier to get multiple guys that you want when that's the game you're playing and you're not competing against 6 or 7 guys for each player. You're competing against 1 or 2.
Interesting.
So yeah, I do really enjoy drafting from the turn. I think that this year is a really good year to have picks 3, 4, 5, or 6, though. I think those are actually the best spots to be drafting from this year. I see a ton of parity from the late second round through the end of the 4th round. And you can jumble up those players in a hat and pick them at random. And I think you'll do about as well as any experts in terms of ordering those 25 players, really. And
so for that reason, you like drafting maybe a slot or 2 later in the first round, so you still get a crack at some of those early second round guys that have a chance to, maybe make it towards the end of the first round and be part of that. What it seems like is what you'd almost call, I think, your kind of second bucket of players. Exactly.
I think there's, depending on my mood, there's between 14 and 17 players in that sort of top tier. And so if I'm drafting 5th, maybe, for example, then I only need 1 or 2 people to sort of what I would define as reach. And I can get 2 of my top 14, and instead of 1 of my top 14, and then 3 players in this who knows where all guessing range.
Yeah, the second round has been kind of a weird, nebulous middle zone the last couple of seasons. Last year, you ended up with all these guys that ended up hurt or disappointing, and this year you've got this strange mishmash of maybe guys that either overachieved or there's an expectation of growth or there's injury risk. The second round is such a goofy spot, but I feel like the one thing that everybody is sort of sitting in agreement on is you kind of don't want to be in that 8, 9, or 10 slot in the first round, because then you're stuck just outside that top group and you're not far enough back where you can actually sort of guarantee yourself 2 of the best guys in the next group. You could end up getting aced out.
I agree.
Okay, so you're in that one. It seems like there's such a weird drop-off there. Let me ask you about one of the hot names in these first 2 rounds, and that's Kawhi Leonard. Where do you sit in terms of the risk you're willing to take on him?
So before the I have him kind of in my 8, 9, 10 range, basically.
Okay.
And it's very much to me sort of uncertain as to the order. I think I've got him at 8. I had Jimmy Butler, I think, slightly ahead of him at that 8 spot, but the recent the sort of the Butler uncertainty gives me a little bit of pause. So, between Butler and Paul George and Kawhi, I've got them 8, 9, 10, and I'm vacillating frequently on the order of the 3.
So you're not too worried about all the drama that surrounded Kawhi last year and even before his trade. You've got him ranked kind of more like where he'd be if he was mostly healthy.
If he was mostly healthy, he would be inside my top 6. So I do have him down a peg. Okay. I have him, to me, there's a top 6, there's Nikola Jokic, and then there's a big, another sort of 7 or 8 players. Mm-hmm. And he goes from ahead of Nikola Jokic with the top 6 to below Nikola Jokic. So I do see a difference there. But the way the top of the draft looks this year, there's only one player in that mid-tier. So it looks pretty close.
Interesting. Okay, so other general thoughts on the draft. Guys that you were a little surprised where they went, maybe early or late, maybe someone that you were hoping to get besides the guys that Jonas took from you. Any other thoughts on kind of how this mock went and what people could maybe learn from it as they plot their own course?
So one thing is that I was pleasantly surprised by is how early Chris Middleton went. I think he's going a lot later. I think when reliable ADP numbers start coming out, he's going to end up a lot lower. And he went 21st in this, and no one questioned it at all. No one batted an eye. I think some people were like, yeah, that's a good pick. And so I think that that's an area for people who aren't in an expert league or an industry league. I think Chris Middleton is really a name to keep an eye on. I think that it's really this one, the horror story that is Dennis Smith Jr. Gather round, friends.
Ooh.
I want to tell you a tale.
Yes, weave me a tale, Alex. I've got my s'mores ready to go. I want a ghost story.
It's a horror story.
Oh God.
Once there was a room full of 12 theoretically intelligent people who all know what they're doing and on some level get paid to play fantasy sports. And yet one of these 12 individuals was so influenced by the pre-draft rankings listed on the host site that they were drafting from, that they drafted a player who should be outside the top 150, who shouldn't even be on your big board, inside the top 70. Gasp. Ooh, ah. So we were drafting on Fantrax. We were drafting on Fantrax. Fantrax had Smith comically early, somewhere in the 70s or something. And we knew that he wasn't going to go there. But even in a room full of experts, just seeing Dennis Smith Jr.'s name at the top of the draft board, going unselected, pick after pick after pick, someone ended up taking Dennis Smith Jr. at the 90th overall pick. Guys, we need to be better than this. You have to go into your draft with your own pre-draft rankings. And if you did that, if you went in with your own pre-draft rankings, you would see that Dennis Smith isn't listed. Dennis Smith's best 27 days last season. Why am I sorting by best 27 days, you ask? Because he didn't have a month good enough to count. I have to cut off the ends of the month to get a sample where his numbers are even decent enough to be worth mentioning here. His best 27 days, he posted value as the 89th best per game player. He was drafted 90th in this alleged expert draft. He was drafted at his absolute best case scenario that he only kept going for 27 days last year. He was outside of the top 150 overall. He shouldn't be drafted. And just because he's at the top of the board in your host site, you gotta ignore him. And it's a horror story that should emphasize the importance of coming in with your own pre-draft list. Sorry, I needed to go on a Dennis Smith rant.
I got to double check and see if that was an auto pick, and I don't know how to find it anymore after the fact. I have to assume that's probably what happened there.
I've been in a couple of expert rooms where he's been taken inside the top 100 because the host site has him too high. And in the other one that I remember, it was not an auto draft pick. Someone picked him. He was at the top of the board that long. You think, there's some level where just the cognitive impact, you just feel like you got to do it. But you got to resist.
Yeah, that's the power of the draft board in the room. It sways the ADPs on guys. Everybody basically in the league ends up like that, and there's usually, to me, this is actually kind of a good piece of information. Even if you take out the Dennis Smith Jr. part of it, whatever league you're in, you, the listener, there's probably going to be one or two people in your league that mostly draft based on that list of names on the board in front of them. So kind of try to understand who those people are, and you can better predict how the rest of your draft is going to go, what guys you can leave on the board a little bit longer. You can get the team that you want a little bit easier on that front. Alex, wonderful thoughts today. Thank you, my good man. Thank you for carving out some time for us, and thank you for telling us a ghost story.
Thanks for having me.
He is Alex Rikleen. He is a fantasy sports writer for RotoWire and DraftKings. He is available on Twitter at Rikleen, Rikleen. You can check out his brand new podcast, Fast Breaks Fantasy. You can find it by following Alex on Twitter. That's the easiest way. One more time, thank you, Alex.
Thanks, man.
And, of course, we have a coupon code tied to every guest appearance here on Fantasy NBA Today as we roll towards NBA opening night. The coupon code is for $3 off the Hoop Ball Draft Guide. Hoop-ball.com is the website. You click on the Draft Guide link. You go to buy the Draft Guide, and you can get it $3 off using the coupon code Alex. That's an easy one, right? He's on the show. Simple. ALEX. Alex is your coupon code. It's $3 off the Draft Guide. Use it. Or lose it? No, it'll be good until opening night. It's good unless there's a massive sale going on. That's the only time you can't take another $3 off if it's already like half off. But whatever the price is, whatever it's running, normal price, $3 off with coupon code Alex. Again, thank you to Alex Rikleen for coming on the pod, talking about the mock draft and our era of the guest. We'll continue. We got more coming up. I know I said it at the outset, but man, I love this time of year. I love it. I just love it. Thank you to Alex Rikleen again for coming on the pod. You heard the promo code today is Alex, $3 off over at hoop-ball.com. Other things of note at Hoopball yesterday, and we talked about it on yesterday's podcast, but I want to reiterate a few things. Yesterday, the B150 was officially added to the Draft Guide. The Draft Guide now contains the Brewski 150. It has been updated for October 1st. Aaron pulled an all-nighter Sunday into Monday to make sure he had all of his projections exactly where he wanted them as that bad boy goes out to it's not the general public because it's still premium content, but to all of the Draft Guide subscribers. You can go get that with your coupon code if you like, hoop-ball.com. Click on the premium tab, choose Go Premium, and then select the Draft Guide. You can buy it for $3 off with the coupon code and get the B150 contained within. So that's pretty sweet. Number 2, we resurrected an old podcast yesterday. Folks, the box score breakdown is back. My good buddies, Adrian Benjamins and Neil Rochlani, are hosting the box score breakdown for this coming season here at hoop-ball.com. I am so excited for the two of those guys. They worked their butts off this offseason, learning the podcast trade, learning how all of the marketing and posting goes, learning how to do it from a scheduling standpoint. As you know, you heard them doing episodes here on Fantasy NBA Today. They filled in for me when I was took my Iron Man busting vacation. They were doing Friday episodes. There was a couple days in there where I was dealing with a family thing, and they filled in then as well. Just awesome guys with great fantasy minds and like the unbridled enthusiasm for podcasting. You're going to love it. You can find it at Hoopball. It's very easy to locate there. Box Score Breakdown has an iTunes page. It's available on Google Play and Stitcher and Spotify, and I think maybe iHeartRadio. I know you have to have like an episode posted recently to get on that one, so it's possible we might have to wait and resubmit. But it's basically available everywhere that podcasts are, thanks to the fact that it had existed in the past as Aaron Brewski's Box Score Breakdown. Now it's Hoopball's Box Score Breakdown. It's a product of the whole website. So Adrian and Neil busting out, guns blazing with their return of the Box Score Breakdown. That came out yesterday. They're doing 3 shows a week until the season starts, and then it'll be every day, Monday through Friday, all business days, I should say, breaking down the evening's box scores the moment the games end. It is an unbelievably useful tool for those of you that have moves you can make for the following day. I repeat, if you're in a league where you make a move and it impacts your roster, not for that moment, but for the next day, that means that you're in the kind of league where you can make a move as the games are happening. Even if you have a player in that game, you can drop that guy because it's impacting the next day. Generally, if you're in a league where your roster moves impact that moment, if you have a guy that you're trying to drop that's playing, it's going to say, sorry, your player is currently active. But if you're in a league where it impacts the next day, This show, not right now, obviously, because there are no games at the moment other than preseason stuff, but as the season begins, this is a show that's going to be coming out late at night for everybody except, West Coast and Hawaiian time, I suppose. So it'll be coming out when the games end, so around 9:30, 10 o'clock Pacific time in the evening. That way you can listen to it the second the games are ending and know what you got to do. You don't have to wait until the next day anymore. It's going to make me obsolete, and I still think you should subscribe to it, and I still think you should listen to it, and I think you should leave me and go listen to that podcast. We're doing more with guests over here these days. It's awesome. It's so much fun. It's going to cut into our time to do a ultra deep box score stuff. So now we've got 2 shows on the fantasy side. I'm stoked. Go check that out. That's the box score breakdown. Also relevant, we got a handful of spots left in the listener leagues that we're almost out. I think we have like 4 spots left total, unless a whole bunch of people come out of the woodwork, and then we'll open up a new league. That is available via the Hoopball forums, hoop-ball.com. Click on the forums tab and go to the Hoopball Leagues thread, or you can just tweet at me, at Dan Besbris, or at Ball with Neil, Neil. That's Neil Rochlani. Just talked about him a second ago. At Adrian Benjamins, by the way, if you want to follow Adrian over on that box score breakdown show, to tweet at me or at Neil, and we will get you hooked up in one of the Hoopball listener leagues as well. Okay, that's about it for today's show. I wanted to try to keep that stuff as quick as possible. I got into lightning fast talking mode. This is like basketball play-by-play style. Dan, thank you again to Alex Rikleen. Code is Alex if you want $3 off today's show. Tomorrow, we'll keep talking to the pros as the era of the guest continues here on Fantasy NBA Today. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Enjoy the start of the baseball postseason if you're a baseball guy like me. If not, then don't. See you later.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.